Enlistment and the formation of military identity. It's as if I'm reliving that initial period of preparing for the army even now, with its strict routine and the mixed feeling of excitement and uncertainty. I perfectly remember how I prepared for departure, getting every detail in order. One of the things that stuck in my mind is making my own wooden suitcase. It was a custom back then for recruits to have a solid suitcase in which to carry their essentials. I worked diligently on it, cutting and carefully joining each piece of wood, feeling as if each hammer blow sealed my entry into a new world, a world of rigor and military discipline. I still remember the day of departure, with the emotions washing over me, feelings of fear, young men with similar destinations, each carrying hopes, fears, and that wooden suitcase, a symbol of the new stage. Marion took me by train to the unit. He enthusiastically told me what it was like in the army, as he had just finished his military service. My destination was Targutio, where I had been assigned to the anti-aircraft artillery. After a few hours of train travel, we arrived in Targutio. When I arrived in the city and headed towards the military unit where I had been assigned, I noticed a long alley leading to the buildings. And right in front of the 39th Mountain Hunters Battalion Geo unit, Constantine Brancusi's endless column stood proudly. That image was striking, a symbol of spirituality and the aspiration towards the heights, placed before a place dedicated to discipline and military rigor. I wondered then what kind of experience awaited me in this place. After the registration formalities and receiving the initial equipment, the moment came for the platoon assignments. When I was led to our dormitory, the first impression was one of amazement. It was a large, vast room with an impressive number of beds, mostly bunk beds, lined up in orderly rows. It seemed like a human anthill, a place where individual privacy was diluted into collectivity. Each bed was a small personal island in an ocean of uniformity, waiting to be occupied and personalized by its new occupant. The first day of instruction was a return to order and discipline, starting with marching. I remember the rhythm of the cadence, the effort to maintain perfect alignment, and the feeling of being part of a unified body. However, in the following days, I surprisingly discovered what the planner scout specialization really meant. Contrary to my images of running across fields, I was led into a classroom. It was an amusing moment, realizing that from the high school benches, I had landed directly on the army benches. Here, we learned about the plotting board, a transparent glass on which we had to write the coordinates of observed aircraft. The writing was reversed, from right to left, so that the commanding officer, on the other side, could correctly read the situation in the airspace. It was an activity that required concentration and precision. I remember how my colleagues and I competed, in a competitive spirit, to see who could track and note as many aerial targets as possible on the plotting board. We received coordinates through headphones and had to indicate what the planes were doing, how many there were, in what direction they were moving, whether they were simulating bombings or paratrooper drops. It was static work, but it required constant attention and the ability to react quickly to the information received. The time spent in Targutio was intense, with diverse experiences. I clearly remember the moment when I was assigned to the first patrol on the city streets. Back then, military patrols were a common presence, and for me, as a young recruit, it was an important feeling of responsibility to represent the army in the middle of the community. Another unforgettable moment was the first time I fired a weapon. I felt the weight and recoil of the gun in my hand, a powerful and new sensation. To my surprise, I did very well, managing to aim accurately. It was a feeling of satisfaction and perhaps even a touch of pride. Equally memorable was the night firing, when each tracer round left a luminous trail in the darkness, followed by the impact of the bullet on the target, a strange and fascinating spectacle. I also had the mission of guarding the command post. I remember that small hut, built seemingly in a hurry, which in winter seemed extremely fragile. The cold was piercing, and I had the sensation that at any moment the wind could carry it away. To warm myself during the long nights on guard duty, I slept with a small electric heater held tightly in my arms. It was the only way to ward off the cold. In fact, I lived in that hut for 2 consecutive weeks, leaving the place only when it was absolutely necessary to go for meals. However, most of the time, I preferred to take my food with me and stay at my post. I didn't go to the mess hall, preferring those moments of solitary silence in the cold, with my simple food, over the agitation and noise of the canteen. Paradoxically, those hours of silence and cold also had an aspect of respite, a break from the intense routine of training. After the intense period of instruction and the diverse experiences in Targugio, the day of the military oath arrived. I clearly remember the solemn ceremony organized in the center of Targugio. It was an important day for all the recruits, a public commitment to the country and to military values. We marched in parade step, with emotion and a feeling of pride, in front of the army general and other officials. Immediately after the solemnity of the oath, when I was perhaps hoping for good news regarding a possible assignment closer to home, in Bucharest, I was informed by the unit commander. With a tone that seemed sincerely regretful, he told me that, for objective reasons, it was not possible to approve my request. Instead, my next destination was Brasov. It was a moment of slight disappointment, I admit, because I had hoped to be closer to my family and familiar places. However, at the same time, I also felt a certain curiosity about this new city and what this new stage of military service would offer me. Before heading to Brasov to continue my military service, I was granted a 2-week leave. It was a pleasant surprise and a much-awaited moment of respite. I was able to return home to Bucharest, to see my family and friends and share with them the experiences from Targugio and the news of my new destination. These 2 weeks were precious, giving me the necessary time to emotionally recharge and prepare for a new adventure in the different landscape of Brasov. When I arrived in Brasov, I was immediately struck by the beauty of the city and its atmosphere steeped in history. The council square, with its old and imposing buildings, and the black church, with its Gothic silhouette, immediately caught my attention. It was a city with a strong identity, different from Bucharest and Targugio. I still remember how cold it was during that period and how, from the military unit, you could see Poiana Brasov with its illuminated ski slope and the imposing Carpathian mountains covered in snow. The landscape was spectacular, offering a view that contrasted with the rigors of military life but which, at the same time, inspired a feeling of grandeur and peace. In Brasov, I continued my military service, but before arriving here, during my time in Targugio, I took an important exam to confirm my specialization as a planner scout. It was a theoretical and practical test, in which I was assessed on my knowledge of coordinates, aircraft identification, and correct plotting board writing. The emotions were high, but I managed to pass this exam successfully, obtaining the official qualification for this specialization. Thus, the period in Brasov was one in which I put into practice what I had learned and continued to develop my skills within the anti-aircraft artillery unit. When I arrived at the military unit in Brasov and entered the assigned dormitory for the first time, I was pleasantly surprised by the difference compared to the barracks in Targugio. Here, the beds were arranged in 2 rows, one on the left and one on the right, without being bunk beds. The floor was solid parquet, which creaked slightly with each step, and in the middle of the dormitory lay a long carpet that absorbed the noise and gave a more welcoming feeling. At the ends of the dormitory were 2 large terracotta stoves, which ran on gas, suggesting that winters here were taken seriously and that more attention was paid to thermal comfort. I fondly remember the period when I began to familiarize myself with the specific weaponry of the mountain hunter unit. The submachine gun with a folding stock was something completely new to me, different from the fixed stock weapons I had been familiar with until then. I practiced assembling and disassembling it against the clock, trying to achieve the required speed and precision. The period in Brasov also involved participation in military exercises. There, during the exercises, we simulated various war scenarios, putting into practice the learned procedures for identifying and tracking aerial targets. I remember that there were also some old planes on the field, some of which seemed to date back to World War II, adding a special air to those exercises. It was fascinating to think about the history of those aircraft and the evolution of military technology to the present day, while we were training to face contemporary aerial threats. Another important part of the training in Brasov was the shooting exercises, which took place in mountainous areas. I remember the effort of the ascent with the equipment, the concentrated atmosphere on the firing range, and the deafening sound of the burst of bullets. These exercises were a valuable experience, showing me the importance of mastering the equipment and the need for constant training to achieve the desired accuracy. Not long after my arrival in Brasov, and to my surprise, I was proposed for the rank of Private First Class. I understood that it was the highest rank I could obtain during my military service, because the corporal ranks were occupied by replacement soldiers, present only during guard duty, and the sergeants were all enlisted personnel. I perfectly remember the day I was brought out in front of the unit to receive my new insignia. I was emotional and proud at the same time. The lieutenant, while pinning the stripes on my shoulder, whispered softly with a smile, "Now say loudly, I serve the fatherland." I uttered the words with power and conviction. It was a memorable day for me, a moment when I felt I had achieved something important in this stage of my life. With obtaining the rank of Private First Class, greater responsibilities also came. Practically, I had command of a platoon, being responsible for the other soldiers both during the day, during training and current activities, and during the night. I especially remember the moments when the officers left the unit at the end of the program. Then, I was often designated as the duty non-commissioned officer, which involved constant supervision and ensuring order and discipline throughout the night. It was a challenge, but also a sign of trust from my superiors, who thus offered me the opportunity to develop my leadership skills and take responsibility. Every evening, the unit's routine included the commander's roll call, a solemn moment when each platoon reported on the present personnel. After each platoon's report, the national anthem was listened to with due military honors. I remember with a special emotion the moment when the unit commander began to call on me, a simple Private First Class, to give the report for the entire unit. It was an unexpected responsibility and an immense honor. In those moments, I felt everyone's eyes on me, and my voice had to be clear and resolute as I commanded the battalion for the report and for the salute to the anthem. It was a recognition of my efforts and a moment of great personal pride. In those moments, a strong feeling of pride washed over me. To see an entire battalion, a large unit of soldiers, executing my orders, those of a simple Private First Class, without any hesitation, was a truly remarkable experience. That unique sensation of commanding an entire unit, a feeling that my voice carried weight and that military discipline manifested through the prompt and orderly response of each soldier, remained firmly etched in my mind. It was a valuable lesson about responsibility and the power that comes with assuming a leadership role, even on a small scale. One evening in Brasov, something unusual happened. When the time for the evening roll call came, I simply stayed in the dormitory, standing guard as a sentinel. To my surprise, after a while, another soldier was sent by the unit commander to look for me and escort me to him to give him a personal report. The fact that the commander noticed my absence and sent someone specifically for me surprised me and made me feel uncomfortable, but also important at the same time. One aspect that aroused an intense emotion in me every time I went on guard duty was the moment when I received live ammunition. It was not a game. We loaded the weapon with real bullets, feeling a cold shiver at the touch of the metal. I perfectly remember how we had to carefully count each bullet and insert it carefully into the magazine. We had the same rigorous procedure when coming off guard duty, when we had to check and count the bullets again to make sure nothing was missing. It was a great responsibility and a constant reminder of the seriousness of the situation. Flight into the unknown. In one of those brief incursions into the world of dreams, I suddenly awoke, carried as if into another era. I remember, when I was in the army, during one of the quiet nights spent in the barracks dormitory, I had a dream so vivid and intense that it felt more like a distant memory. I woke up suddenly, my heart pounding, carried as if into another era. The bright night enveloped an imposing Roman citadel. The smell of smoke and incense filled my nostrils. I felt myself standing, dressed in a simple tunic, with a leather belt cinching my waist. I felt the cold weight of a dagger attached to it. Around me, the paved streets of the citadel pulsed with life, torches cast long shadows over the faces of hurried merchants, armored soldiers, and slaves retreating to their homes. A strange sensation gripped me, a mixture of familiarity and distance. It was like a distant memory, whispered from the depths of time, yet at the same time a palpable reality, lived with every fiber of my being. I felt like I was one of them. A commander with a sharp gaze? A skilled merchant, negotiating by torchlight? Or perhaps an enigmatic spy, slipping through the crowd to observe the movements of power? From the terrace of a tall building, I admired the grand temple dedicated to Jupiter, its imposing silhouette shining under the silvery moonlight. A name whispered in my mind, like an echo from the past, Apulum, one of the largest and most important Roman cities north of the Danube. In the distance, a man looked at me intently. A strange sensation gripped me, as if I had seen that intense gaze somewhere before, in a distant dream or a vague memory. He made a discreet sign, inviting me to approach. My heart began to beat faster. Who was he, and what did he want from me in this strange place? I approached slowly, with a feeling of unease mixed with an inexplicable curiosity. The man had a feverish look and seemed agitated. He whispered in a hoarse tone, glancing quickly around. "Mysterious man. We don't have much time. The praetor knows, and has sent men after you." "Me, the praetor? What does he know?" I managed to ask, confused and alarmed at once. "Man, that you are not who you seem to be." He glanced quickly over his shoulder, as if followed by shadows, then slipped a rolled piece of parchment, sealed with wax, into my palm. "Flee to the port, look for Marcellus. Tell him the wolves are coming." Before I could articulate any response, an arrow pierced the night air with a sinister hiss and lodged in the man's chest. An explosion of blood stained the pavement, and a short sigh ended his life. The man collapsed to his knees, his eyes clouded with death, looking at me with a final, silent warning. There was no time to lose. The instinct for survival took over. I snatched the heavy cloak from his shoulders and quickly headed towards the edge of the city, feeling the mysterious parchment in my hand, my only link to an unseen threat and an uncertain future in that foreign yet familiar world. The wind whipped my face as I fled through the winding streets of Apulum, aware of the heavy and rapid footsteps of soldiers who seemed to be on my trail. I clenched my fist around the parchment, feeling how those few written lines could change everything. I sped past a dark tavern from which raised voices and the clinking of glasses could be heard. Two men were arguing in Latin, and a Dacian slave, with a sad look, was hurriedly wiping the tables. Time seemed to dilate, each second charged with a sense of urgency. In a fraction of a second, my mind carried me back to Stoanesti, to the warm summer evenings when the vacation seemed endless. Music boomed from the speakers of the old village disco, colored lights danced on the dusty floor, and young people moved with boundless energy. And in the middle of that effervescence, I saw her. She exuded an air of mystery and a beauty that seemed to come from another world. Her long hair framed her delicate face, and her enigmatic smile made me feel an inexplicable connection, as if we had known each other forever. In those nights, the disco became a labyrinth of lights and sounds, and she was the only fixed point, a lighthouse in a sea of the unknown. And there, among them, I saw her, the principal's daughter. She was as beautiful as I remembered her, with her long hair flowing freely over her shoulders and a smile that banished every other thought. In those nights, time dilated in a different way, and the disco became our universe, a place where everything seemed possible. She approached slowly, and our gazes met, creating an electric connection. "Do you think dreams can become real?" she whispered to me, looking me straight in the eye. Before I could answer, the familiar sensation of the Roman citadel enveloped me again. The disco lights went out suddenly, giving way to a golden glow that transformed into the cold light of the torches in Apulum. I was once again on the cold stones, and the parchment in my hand seemed to pulse with a strange energy. The girl's whispered words mingled with the man's warning, "Do you think dreams can become real?" Suddenly, a sharp voice pierced the din of the market. Roman soldier, shouting from behind, there. Take him alive. There was no more time for memories or interpretations of the dream. Adrenaline pulsed through my veins. I threw myself into a crowded marketplace where locals were selling their wares. A potter gave me a surprised look as I squeezed past his fragile vessels, and an old Dacian woman cursed me in her harsh language when I nearly knocked over a basket of fruit. Before I could take the next step, a strong hand grabbed my wrist. Unknown voice, if you want to live, come with me. I looked into the man's eyes, a sharp but familiar gaze. A strange sensation washed over me, as if I had encountered that intense look somewhere before, in a distant dream or a vague memory. Who are you? I managed to whisper, but he only motioned for me to follow him, without uttering a word. How does he know who I am? And what role will he play in this desperate escape? Return to reality. I woke up suddenly in the barracks, my heart pounding. The faint light of dawn seeped through the blinds, painting long shadows on the rows of beds. The strange sensation of the dream, the flight through the Roman city, the mysterious parchment, and the stranger's intense gaze, was still vivid in my mind. It had felt so real. I slowly got out of bed, trying to gather my thoughts. What did that dream mean? Why had my mind taken me on such an adventure, to a time and place so distant? The parchment, with the question whispered from the depths of memory, do you think dreams can become real? Still echoed in my ears. Was it just a simple fantasy of a tired brain, or did it hide a message, a deeper meaning? The contrast between the agitation of the dream and the peace in the dormitory was striking. For a moment, I felt like I was between two worlds, between the harsh reality of military service and the boundless realm of the subconscious. But I didn't have much time to lose myself in contemplation. The strict routine of the army did not allow such digressions. The shrill sound of the bugle shattered any trace of the dream, calling us to the morning report. I had to get up, quickly put on my uniform, make my bed with precision, and line up in the courtyard, leaving behind the mysteries of the Roman city and the unanswered questions of the dream. The day in the army followed its inexorable course, and I was a soldier again, with its tasks and responsibilities. But something had changed within me. The seed of a mystery had been planted, and the echoes of the dream would accompany me for a long time to come.